I apologize in advance for this because I'm probably going to ruffle some feathers for today's video, and it's mostly surrounding Aptera because I think we don't appreciate them enough, and I don't think we realize how special of a product they've really designed and are really trying hard right now to get into production. And I know there's a lot of EV startups, and a lot of people out there are worried about these startups going bankrupt or scamming people out of their money, you know, the Nikola Motors effect and all that. But there's a certain amount of passion and interest surrounding the Aptera community that I can't really find elsewhere other than maybe in the early days of the Tesla space. And I honestly feel like Aptera is a lot more like Tesla than most of these other EV startups because they have such a clear and singular vision, and they haven't really gotten distracted over the years at all, but they've always come back to funding issues. But just as a reminder, like, Aptera has been around longer than just the last couple years. Like, Steve and Chris were trying to get this company off the ground way before even the Model S came out, and they have old YouTube videos you can watch where they talk about all of the ways that basically the laws of physics and aerodynamics are what dictate the design of this product. And there's some cosmetic things and some efficiency enhancements they've made, but for the most part, the design of the launch edition Aptera we have today is very, very similar to the launch of the original Aptera prototypes they had way back in the earlier 2000s. And it's because I think, unlike Canoo or unlike Lucid Motors or unlike VinFast or Fisker Ocean, all of these random startups that basically just have the goal of, let's make another electric car brand, and what's different about you guys? I don't know, we're more luxurious, I don't know, we're more crappy, we're more focused on performance, or, you know, they all have such similar, like, blurs of exterior and interior design, where you're basically, like, rolling the dice or asking ChatGPT, design an electric crossover, and they just all kind of spew out the same crap. Aptera has a very specific mission statement: deliver to the world the most energy efficient vehicles possible. And that is a absolutely crucial and noble mission statement for the future of sustainable transport, guys. Like, you know why we're switching to electric cars? You know why this whole EV thing is happening? It's not because batteries are more fun than gasoline. It's not because electric cars are faster than gas cars, although they are. It's not just because it's more fun, it's because we want to believe in a future that's real. And relying on fossil fuels and gasoline for the rest of humanity is just not practical, and it's just not sustainable. And the main reason we're switching to electric cars is because they are more efficient. They're much more sustainable. We can recycle battery packs and get most of the materials back, and even old electric vehicle battery packs can be repurposed into energy storage for the grid. And we're gonna need vehicles to transport ourselves around in the future, regardless of where you live in the world. And it's just kind of blowing my mind that there's really only one company right now with the logic of saying, hey, if we're moving towards battery electric vehicles and, you know, our grid is probably going to struggle to keep up with the increasing number of electric vehicles that are all going to be charging overnight, let's design a vehicle from the ground up that is intended to be more energy efficient. And that involves making it hyper aerodynamic, even more so than a Tesla Model 3 or a Lucid Air. And let's focus on making it affordable, and let's focus on making it practical and having lots of storage space and still having an enclosed cabin so you can drive it at night in the rain or even the snow. Aptera, in my opinion, is the only company looking at how do we make cheaper EVs, not like $50,000 crossovers, not $80,000 sedans, but let's make a vehicle that is so incredibly efficient, because one of the rare special things about battery electric vehicles is that there's so much infrastructure for electricity to pull from, and we have the technology for these vehicles to literally charge themselves. How does this not get talked about more? Like the fact that Aptera has come up with a super energy efficient design where solar on the vehicle actually starts to make sense. Putting solar on a Model Y or a Fisker Ocean, it's all trivial. It powers the HVAC or it powers the computer systems, but definitely doesn't really give you that much of a worthy charge to get any meaningful range out of it. Whereas Aptera, they're the only ones targeting like 30 to 40 miles of range per day, and barely anybody wants to talk about this company. No, we're all distracted on how fancy of the leather can we make in our Lucids, or let's check out VinFast car, which has average specs, and they're blowing all their money on collaborations with content creators to get their logo and name out there, but the cars themselves are they're fine. They're not great. They're not that reasonable. Same story with so many of these other startups out there. You know, I applaud Canoo for at least having an original design approach, but still, it's just a weird looking SUV at the end of the day. Yeah, it unlocks some more practicality and there's some good visibility there, but we're not not moving to electric vehicles just so we can have weirder cars on the market. That's not why Aptera looks the way it does. They're not just going for, let's be weird. There's functionality behind this design choice, and there's intentionality, and it's the only one that's actually leaning into the entire purpose of switching to electric vehicles. It's the antithesis of the Hummer EV, which is like, humans keep driving and designing these horribly inefficient vehicles, so let's take the most horrible, inefficient vehicle on the road and absolutely stuff it to the brim with batteries so that we can't build them at a high enough volume to actually deliver on the demand. Whereas Aptera is targeting like 400 miles of range, beating out 99% of the EV market, and doing it with a battery pack that is smaller than 99% of the EV market. 45 kilowatt hours giving you 400 miles of range, and you can get 40 miles of range added per day just sitting in the sun. How many comments do I see all the time about how, no, home charging doesn't work for me because I park on the street or I live in an apartment, so I can't plug in. Okay, here's a vehicle that can literally charge itself. And if you live in an apartment, you're less likely to take advantage of the second row of vehicles anyway, because people who live in apartments tend to not have as many kids, or it's more likely that someone who's single or just a couple living in an apartment, whereas if you have a family and need more seats, they tend to live in, of course, single family homes. So sure, there's some compromises involved with the Aptera, and it's a bit bizarre, and every time someone looks at it, they just instantly assume this must be a dangerous vehicle, and they don't look into the actual numbers proving that no, there are crumple zones, there are roll cages, and there are side impact resistant design trends that Aptera is building into this vehicle, and it still has airbags. And once you factor in the 10-year ownership cost of this vehicle, you'll realize this thing is actually on track to be the cheapest car ever you could buy new, because it costs almost nothing to drive this dang thing. Even on the rare days where you are DC fast charging it and you're having to pay for that electricity, we're talking 300 miles per gallon equivalent. That's more than double what the most energy efficient EVs are getting on the road today. Even if you gotta replace all the tires, it's gonna cost less on the Aptera than any other EV, because it's a three-wheeler, and I know because it's weird, people are resistant to change, and I'm mostly annoyed that basically they've come up with this incredible product that clearly has a huge addressable market globally, not just in the United States, but EVs that can go this far on a single charge and they can power themselves. We can't get this on gasoline cars. We can't get this on hydrogen fuel cells. There's not going to be another chemistry out there or another design out there other than the Aptera, because of its extreme efficiency, that's capable of just driving around and saying, nope, you don't need to plug me in. We don't need to go to a charging station, because as long as there's a sun outside, there usually is, I'll be able to take care of my own battery pack, thank you. Like, that is so insanely cool, and yet they're stuck in this we need funding to start production stage. I've never wanted to be a billionaire more so in my entire life, because unfortunately I'm not a super rich guy, so even if I sold my house, sold all the money in my retirement fund, sold my car, and basically decided to live on a box on the side of the road, I still wouldn't have enough money to get Aptera into production. But there's millionaires and billionaires out there that could absolutely give up a tiny percentage of their net worth, and I'm including you, Elon Musk. I would have much rather Elon get Aptera started in production than buy Twitter, so that there could be focus on extremely efficient and affordable electric vehicles, which ultimately supports the entire mission of transitioning the world to more sustainable energy in the first place. And I think they're having to get really creative right now with their efficient spending and figuring out like, hey, if you invest more in us now, you'll get your Aptera launch edition earlier, which is, I think, a very creative way to convince more people to invest in the company, because they're basically at this point less than $47 million away of being able to start production. $47 million is keeping this company from being able to ramp up and deliver hundreds of thousands of vehicles across the world that are going to consume a fraction of the amount of energy in a safe way and in an affordable way. It's not just a rich toy. It's not just another bland SUV so that we can have 15 electric SUV options to choose from instead of 12. Yeah, sorry, I don't care about most of these other EV startups because they're not daring to do anything different, and they're not really supporting the whole reason we're switching to electric in the first place. They're just all flexing how personal and how subjectively nice they can make their interiors and exteriors, but it's all the same crap at the end of the day. Who cares if you have a portrait mode display or a landscape display? Who cares if you have 30 cubic feet of storage or 50 cubic feet of storage? You're all the same crap. Aptera's the only one out of all of you that has an ounce of originality and a gallon of purpose in their design design schemes to where, hey, let's actually change the world. Not only will the future look like the future, but also eliminate processes left and right. I mean, how often do you hear people criticizing the EV transition saying, well, you know, you think electric vehicles are better for the environment, but you gotta plug them in and charge them with a coal-powered grid anyway. There's a lot of faults in that argument, but it doesn't even hold up a little bit with the Aptera because it's got its own solar panels on it. So you can't even say, well, that EV is driving around from coal power. No, it isn't. It's from the sunlight. It picked it up this morning, and that's how you're driving it around. And it's gonna use 10 times less energy as a gas vehicle is. And there's basically no other way you can make a vehicle with 2 seats and over 30 cubic feet of storage and have a 100 watt hours per mile than Aptera does. That 3-wheel design is what allows them to reduce a lot on weight and on cost. It allows them to have far less rolling resistance than typical vehicles. It allows them to weigh like under 2,000 pounds for a vehicle that's still capable of going 400 miles on a charge, which you will not find in the EV space unless you design a vehicle like the Aptera with their composites, with their aerodynamic shape, so they have very little drag at highway speeds. It's just such a genius design, and it kills me how little it's talked about. Like, people still get fed up about Lordstown, and Lucid is still somehow able to convince like billions of dollars to be invested, even though we have evidence that there are people losing interest in this brand. People are canceling their orders, and every quarter they report a higher and higher number of vehicles that aren't delivered because they keep building cars and no one's buying them. And yet somehow they're convincing hundreds of millions of dollars to be invested into them when they can burn money faster than they can build cars. Meanwhile, Aptera is working with industry experts like Sandy Monroe on how to reduce costs, reduce complexity. Also, Aptera is the only company with a brain to admit the North America charging standard is a good idea and we should accommodate for the NACS connector on our own vehicles because CCS is a stupid design and the network in the North American market is falling apart for CCS and a complete tragedy of a dumpster fire when it comes to how reliable a charging network can be. It's a complete joke, and yet none of these other EV startups, even Rivian, even Lucid, can't agree on, yeah, you know what, NACS seems like a good idea. Hyundai won't do it, Kia won't do it, but Aptera, this company that is struggling to get funding, they're the only ones with a brain to say, yeah, actually, NACS, let's do this. This is way more portable. EVs are going to be here to stay for probably hundreds of years, so we shouldn't have to deal with the stupid DC flap that you have to open and then another flap that you have to open for the top connector and this giant bulky cable that's a lot harder to navigate than the NACS connector that doesn't even support as high a transfer speed as NACS can. Like, come on, what is with these EV investors? Why are they so obsessed with luxury car brands that are struggling to turn a profit when there's a company out there that is prioritizing a much wider demographic and, in my opinion, a much more profitable one because they're focused on manufacturing efficiency and because their vehicle is so aerodynamic? That means Aptera is able to make a 400-mile range EV using only a 40 kilowatt-hour battery pack. That's literally like less than half the size of most of their competitors, so they can absolutely still make a profit on those vehicles charging a whole lot less. And of course, these vehicles charge themselves. Like, it kills me that this is a company that is still having to seek funding and hasn't been able to convince enough people that this is the future and this is where vehicles are headed. And I feel like Aptera deserves to succeed really more than any of these other EV startups because they've stayed so true with their consistent mission statement, and they're the only ones focusing also on right to repair as well as making vehicles affordable for the masses. And I know it's a little bit weird looking, it takes some getting used to, but ultimately I think it's the most practical out of any of these EV startups, and it's the only one that kind of acknowledges Tesla is the major player here and they want to work with Tesla. They want to access the supercharging network, and that's why they're using the North America charging standard. And because it's a 3-wheeler with 2 seats, the Aptera isn't really competing with any of Tesla's other vehicles because Tesla's more focused on 5 and 7-seater vehicles. So it drives me nuts that we can't get enough people investing in this company, and I just hope that over time we can convince more and more millionaires and billionaires to invest massively in Aptera so we can get this vehicle on the road and start moving people in the most efficient way possible, because that's what EVs are all about. And ultimately, just seeing all of this money go towards these companies like Canoo or Lordstown or Lucid, where they're clearly not having that much of a future because they're having to liquidate their stocks and they're struggling to find buyers for a lot of their products. It's like, why are we throwing all this money down on the drain where there's one company with a genius product that has a more focused mission statement than anyone else? They only need $47 million, which, when we're talking about the grand scheme of investments in the EV startup space, this is really not much. You'd really only need a handful of investors to scrap together $47 million, but they're all just too skeptical of of it because, well, it looks weird, so I'm not investing. Come on, you guys. Like, seriously, get your head out of the clouds. Accept that the gas age is over, and the companies that are gonna scale the best and be the most profitable are the ones that figure out efficiency and cost better than anybody else. Lucid's got the efficiency, but they don't have the cost. Aptera has way better efficiency and way better cost, and therefore a much wider, a more addressable market. And if you don't see a future in which EVs that can charge themselves are more valuable than EVs that can't, then I don't know how to help you. So feel free to disagree with me if you have an incorrect opinion in the comments down below. And thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. So thanks again. Have an excellent rest of your day.